See you
Julie,
here.
glad to be here.
Good. So, to anybody who is watching, you may know this is the second. Oh, and Candace, you and I have an overlap. So, this is the second ever version of live stream that I've done on Creators of New Earth. And with me is Ether Candace, and she is actually the reason that all things Creators of New Earth are out in the world now. They were, for many years, just an idea inside my head, but I didn't have the technological savvy to make it all happen. And back in 2018, I was in Jamaica, where Candace is now. And I was recording some music at Tough Gong Studios, where Bob Marley recorded a lot of his music. And we were working with many who are into reggae may already know this name, but his name is Chinna Smith, and he's a fabulous guitarist. And way back in the day, he played with Bob Marley, and then he went on to play with almost any reggae band you can think of, including he did a lot of touring with Ziggy Marley. But all that aside, oh, and I'm bringing Chinna up because Candace and I met at Chinna's house in his kitchen. So, anyways, that's how Candace and I met back in 2018. And we kept in touch. And I don't know why it didn't dawn on me a lot earlier to ask her if she could help me with Creators of New Earth. But, they say that, timing has to be right. So I really started thinking more seriously about doing this before I left Santa Fe. But then, of course, I was in the throes of leaving Santa Fe, so I couldn't put that all together. So before I left Santa Fe, I said, "Hey, Candace, there's a conversation I want to have with you once I arrive in Oregon." So once I arrived in Oregon and got settled, I reached out to you and I said, "Here are all my ideas regarding Creators of New Earth. And can you help me?" And you said, "Yeah, that's already what I do. Like that's one of the many hats that I wear." So here we are. So that's about Creators of New Earth, but this is about you. So I have some thoughts of things that I wanted to ask you. And one of the first things I want to ask you is um how old were you when you realized, like, you know what, there's something going on here, like there's just more to life than meets the eye, where you became aware of that? I believe you were pretty young. I follow you and read some of the things that you've written, and so I was like, hey, I didn't know that about her. So maybe you could share a little bit with us.
I was about 5 when I realized that I was a little different. Um, I just wrote an article that went deeper into that on my spiritual website, Soul Trying. But essentially, that's when I started to have the feelings, seeing the spirits, feeling the spirits, and having intense reptile dreams, specifically snake dreams. Um, and I don't know. Um, I knew I was different, but I didn't know who to turn to. That was the thing. Like I didn't know what
Mm-hmm.
to do. And so I've always been a researcher. Like I want to know more all the time. And so when I was old enough to explore on my own, probably about 12, then I got to learn how different I really was. And it never ends. The older I get, the more I realize I am more different. So it's a journey. It's
Mm-hmm.
a constant learning of myself over and over again.
Mm-hmm. So let me backtrack a little bit, and then let me ask you a question that's kind of tied to this question. So, for all of you who have never met Candace or don't know what her offerings now are, we'll talk about that a little bit now and throughout the show. And then at the end, we'll give you some more specifics about how you can contact her directly. But you may notice underneath here, there's a little ticker tape going and it says soultrine.com. So if you do become curious about Candace right now or throughout the show, or at any point, this is where you can reach her and it's where you can explore her various offerings. So um, let me, let me look at something for a minute here. Okay. So there was, when you were a child, you realized, hey, I'm a little different, and you started doing your research to learn that there's more to life than meets the eye, right? So that's, I mean, we're often merging our spiritual and physical lives because they're not separate. But then there's some very like down to earth, real crap, for lack of a better word, that we end up having to deal with in this human suit that we wear. And that looks different, obviously, for every single person. But two major things that you have had to deal with throughout your life and have been dealing with very conscientiously, as part of your path as a human and as part of your spiritual path, which we just said is not separate, is generational curses and also colonization. So maybe can you speak to a couple things, like how have you navigated that? How are you navigating that? So how have you navigated in the past? How you're navigating it now? If you want to, unless it gets to be too complex, you could also share, because you're also a mother of three, soon to be mother of four. And so that's obviously tied in because you have kids, right? So you're working on this ancestral lineage. You're working with the past, you're working with you where you are presently, and then you're working on clearing the way for yourself and your children in the future. So those are all braided together somehow. And maybe um, you could talk about how you have approached and are approaching that. I know
Well,
it's a wordy
a
question,
few,
but I know you know what I'm getting at.
yeah. So it's pretty big, but it's a big task. So every I guess every generation or so, there's a generational curse breaker, and I suppose that it's me. Um, I can't say that curse is fully broken with me, but the full awareness of it is there. So essentially, what I notice about my family is like the women in the family are amazing, and I'm not being biased. They are amazing. They do everything domestically extremely well, and they work really hard at their jobs. There was a time where people either did one or the other. They were 100% domestic or 100%, worked at a job. But while being married, this is the lifestyle that they lived. And I've realized now so many women live this life. There's a new awareness called married single mothers, where these are women who go to work every day, come home, take care of the kids, cook and clean as if they were a housewife, and they are married. Um, Most of them are talking about, how they may have two incomes, and some of them don't have two incomes in the house. They are the income, and they have to do everything. So, in my awareness, these were women who had two incomes in the house, but they did everything, and they weren't treated like the queens that they are. They weren't. They were with people who just always wanted more, and more, and more, and more. And so as a child, I could see, oh, I don't want that. I don't want that in my life. But this is something that I have attracted in my own romantic life. There's people who want more, people who are, you know, not necessarily. recognizing what other people need. They're selfish, very selfish. And so that comes with so much. I mean, that's like a whole nother show. But what I had to look at was, all right, where does this come from? It comes from a level of insecurity, a level of inferiority complex slash superiority complexes, um, to where you have a colonial way of thinking that is just kind of bred in through life. So, for example, when I say colonial way of thinking, is back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I mean like almost ancient times. We have people all over the world, not just people in African and Native American civilizations, but even European civilizations, had societies where the women were the matriarchs. They were the head of the household, the head of the tribe. But it wasn't until you got your, I want to say, Christian way of thinking that changed that changed it across the board for everyone globally. So when I'm speaking of the colonized, back in the day, I used to just only think of people who are descendants of Africa, descendants of the Americas. In time, I learned that the first people who were really colonized were Europeans, and that knowing that completely changed the way I looked at everything because it was almost as if they were the experiment. Like we can do it with them, we can do it with anybody. And so knowing that these different societies had a different way of thinking, where they honored women, where they loved women, where women had more respect, at the very least, equal playing field or in society with men, to come to a place where women were being degraded across the board, up and down. So if you look at my family in particular, you've got this family here, but if you look back in generations and generations and generations, you're going to go end up right there at slavery. When you go to slavery, you're going to end up with people who they had to run a family and parent underneath the rule of someone else. So if the parents are out in the field, or even if it's just a man in the field, but most likely both parents in the field working, and they're being oppressed by a group of people and they can't have the freedom to live as they want to live, and they come home, who are they taking that out on? Their children. If the man is trying to find a place to feel empowered, how is he going to feel empowered? By taking that out on the women and the children. So it's just a thing that just keeps going on where it's like men feel entitled to rule their households. That's something that they continue to pass down, and things kind of get watered down over time where it may not be as bad, but you still have this need and desire to feel powerful, to feel empowered. And if they're not getting it at work, if they're not getting it somewhere, they have to get it somewhere. And the bullying comes into the household, the bullying comes into the children. So there's a lot of people who have fixed this issue generations ago. There's a lot of people who haven't, who are still there, who are still in that mentality. And so it's really just, I really enjoy this time that we have in our life where we can share information and people can learn, the way other people think, the way other people see things, the way other people were raised, so they can get a better understanding of what works and doesn't work for them. The way you were raised may not be right for you, but if there are any, is there, there's any possible way that someone can understand that the way they were behaving is hurtful to another person, and they can't see that in their own home, maybe they can see it by looking at someone else's home or someone else's perspective. To solve here is to heal generational trauma, here and heal ancestral trauma. So for myself, I mean, me personally, it goes back different ways, very different ways. I had a cousin who recently did ancestry. He hired a genealogist to really go back and look at our family And I'm thinking, oh, it's just probably regular like slavery trauma. No, it's worse. It's worse. There's more nationalities involved in my makeup than I ever realized, and some of that has to do with the trauma. And it's really really sad. But the more I learn, the more I'm like, okay, this is what else I have to heal. This is what else
Oh,
I have to do.
yeah. So, you were saying that you realize that there's so much more to your genealogy than you realized, and that makes for more trauma because you've got not trauma just coming through one line, you've got it coming through many bloodlines. Can you speak a little bit to that?
So, um, here's how the story goes. And shout out to my cousin Jackie, Jackie Coleman Jr., who had the ancestry, the genealogists do the work for us because how it goes, and this is just
The
my
tip.
father's side. I haven't even touched my mother's side yet. But on my father's side, you have a long line of people. Okay, so my like, maiden name is Coleman, and I thought that that was just because of how it works in the states. Most black people took the last name of their slave owner, and so I thought it was just that. It turns out it wasn't that. It turns out that the Coleman name was never enslaved, and the reason why it was not enslaved was because they were free. They came from this one Irish man. So how the story goes is that there was an Irish man who was a trader and traded goods for the marriage of a Cherokee woman. Who he traded, I'm not sure, but it sounds traumatic to me for the Cherokee woman that she would be traded for goods. But this was early 1800s. That one man goes through and he's a very fertile man. So he had 8 kids here, next son, 10 kids here, next son, 8 kids here, and we come on up. We come up to my grandfather's parents. Then we have his father, who carries the same name as the Irish man, who then goes to a Choctaw reservation, and he's in his early 20s and marries a 14-year-old Choctaw woman, a girl. So back in that time, that was not very abnormal, but it's a thing. You know, today's times would be like, no. But back in that time, it wasn't as abnormal. So Choctaw Nation is in this particular one is in Mississippi. So I do have like her role information and her death certificate, birth certificate, and stuff like that. So to me, that's traumatic. Then we come, they to me, I mean, because so you have this. She marries him, and they go together to live elsewhere. I believe that she settled in Memphis, but there were some traumas related to the that my grandfather's father that I don't want to talk about here because it's very
Yeah.
very tragic, very. So anyway, they had kids a lot. My grandfather and my grandmother ended up having. My grandmother had a total of 13 children. Um, she had two first. Her husband died of pneumonia because it was back in the day. And then when she met my grandfather, she ended up having 11 more with him. So these are very fertile people. Whole time I think it's my grandma's genes. It's really him. His line is extremely fertile. So, um, so that and then you have my grandmother's line where her mother was murdered by her own family. Her mother was a mixed woman, mixed black and white, and she was murdered by her own family because she was in line to inherit a lot of their wealth that they still have today. Um, and it's just tragic. Actually, their pictures are right there on my thing. But anyway, it's tragic. And she grew up in a very hard life. She grew up in the Great Depression. with no shoes in Mississippi. And if you think about what that meant to someone mentally, she was passed around from relative to relative to relative, not feeling wanted. She was not able to eat. At some homes, she wasn't able to eat with the other children. She had to wait until those people's children ate first, and her and her brother had to eat the scraps. So that tragedy is awful. So then you come to her having her own set of 13 children, and all that she had brought with her, all that her husband had brought with him. Together they put that into the 13 children. And it wasn't love. It wasn't what they knew of. They knew of love as I take care of you. That's their level of love. I feed you. But the way they spoke to the children, the way they abused the children physically, that wasn't okay. So here I come with a father who experienced extreme physical abuse and mental abuse. And that's who raised me. So you go back in time and you have people with all of these abuses and tragedies that they're going through, that they went through, that who got healed and how were they healed? They weren't healed because they just had to keep going, keep surviving, keep putting food on the table. But, you know, certain level of abuse became normal and even a sense of like pride. They, I feel like a lot of my when I was younger, I can't say that they would be the same today, but when I was younger, I feel like my aunts and uncles felt pride in how abusive they were to their children.
Mm.
And I think some of them knew that some of it wasn't as they shouldn't speak on some of it because it was insane. Some of the stuff my cousins went through was ridiculous. But again, we're talking about generational issues, mental issues coming from way back then and swinging into today's times.
So how can you speak to I mean, I still want to there's things that I want to talk about that are
And so
not
I feel
this.
like
Now
all
we're
of my family.
oh, okay. I can you're a little blurry, but I can hear you. Now you're more in focus. Um
Okay, we're good.
can you hear me? Okay, great. So, um yeah, I want to stay on this tip for a minute if that's okay with you. So,
Yeah, that's fine.
we're thinking about how, there's you as Candace in this body in this lifetime and your relatives and in your blood, as with all of us, right? In our blood is the story and patterns and everything they carry in our bloodline. And then we can decide whether or not we would like to unpack that and what we're keeping that we might feel is beneficial, like somebody had some great skills or qualities about them. Maybe they were very compassionate. Maybe they uh, were very community oriented. Whatever it is about them, right? That we decide, hey, I like those qualities from that ancestor. I wanna hold on to that one. But I'm gonna unpack this, abuse or subservience or whatever it is that you're unpacking, right? How have you been able to unpack this in your life, so that it doesn't so that you can have the life that you want to have, and also so your daughters can have the life that they want to have. But you've been taking some very real steps to um break this curse. Can you speak to that a little bit?
It's just healing, like one of the things back in my when I finally got a hold of like mentors to help me with my gifts, they always focused on healing. And it's not easy and it hurts and it doesn't feel good and it's not cool. I'm not, wasn't using my psychic powers that I wanted to expand upon, but it's necessary. An unhealed person with a lot of power is dangerous. But it was necessary not just for my ability to have powers, but for my kids. I um, I was 21 when I had 21 when I found out I was pregnant with my first child. 22 when I actually had her, and I wasn't ready for that. I was nowhere near healed. I wasn't right. Um, and a lot of the things that were pushed onto me, I gave to her. Not all of it, because I was self aware enough to know I don't ever want to experience that. But it's just the way I spoke to her, um, the way, I hit her and things like that. It wasn't right. But I had to come to a place, to where I'm like, okay, I need healing, but I can't carry on like this. And it wasn't until she was about 5 years old that I actually got the healing, started the healing process. And it's a process that's ongoing for the rest of my life. But it was 7 years between the time that I had her and I had my next one. And I honestly feel like that was by divine design, because I needed to be in a better place mentally for her. I mean, for the next her to come around. So there was no way, I don't feel like I was as horrible to her as my father was to me, but it was definitely somewhere where no one should be. You know what I mean? Like, I have friends who they went through worse than what I did go through, but that still doesn't make it right. It still doesn't make the way I was treated right, and it still didn't make the way that my daughter was treated was right. It was not okay. So today, um, it really takes like a lot of mental acrobatics sometimes to make sure you are thinking about everything that happens between you and a child. It's not a matter of giving them what they want every time, going along with everything they say. No, they still have to be parented, but it's like, what type of parenting are we trying to do here? Are we trying to parent them with love? Because here's the thing is, you want your child to know what love is. So when they go out in the world, they know what that looks like. You don't want your child to be normalized by abusive language, abusive touching, anything, any abusive behaviors at all. So that, I think one of my issues that I've had in romantic life was just like, I feel like the way that saw my father treat my mother, which they were married for 42 years now. The way I saw my father treat my mother, the way my father treated me, normalized a level of abuse that by the time I got into relationships, a lot of things that shouldn't have been okay became okay. And that's one of my biggest concerns, is that any of my kids, if they were to grow up and feel like them not being treated and were treated with the utmost respect and love, is anything else other than that is just not okay. And for me, I feel like I have tolerated a lot, and accepted less than in my relationships. And I'm not even just talking about romantic relationships. I mean, relationships across the board,
Mm-hmm.
um, especially friends, um, where someone can just disrespect you, and you just be okay with it. You know what I mean? And not recognize that as disrespect. That would be the issue. There's so many things that have happened in my life, in relationships, where I was not recognizing how disrespectful it was, or how hurtful and intentionally hurtful things were, because that's what I was used to at home. I was used to respected. I was used to someone hurting me intentionally. I was used to gaslighting. All this stuff was normal to me.
Yeah.
So it took maturing and healing for me to recognize, oh no, that's not
Mm-hmm.
okay. Oh no. Wow, I can't tolerate that. And so when you're comfortable with the level of abuse, other people are extra comfortable to give it to you.
Yeah. So it's kind of, would you agree that maybe it's like a fish being in water? It's like as long as you're in that environment, then you don't have anything to contrast and compare it to, unless you're spending a lot of time at somebody else's house and you're like, wait, that's not how they do it over there. Or maybe, oh, they do that over there too. But it's like you said, until you got older and got that maturity, you didn't realize, oh, you just thought that was normal, right? Because that's what you were seeing. It had to do with your environment, right? But once you,
Also, I would add
yeah,
spiritual, like divine intervention. Okay, because like with my first husband, because I'm on husband number two right now, but my first husband, the better I got at healing, the more my spiritual gifts tuned up. And I would get, ooh, my guides would come through and show me stuff, give me information. Half the time, I didn't have to snoop, I didn't have to sneak. They would tell me I didn't realize I was clairaudient until they were trying to tell me things that he was doing. Or like, they would just kind of tune me in to what was going on. So it's like there's a time when your higher self and your spirit guides like, if you don't get off this horse, you we're not dealing with this. Well, let me if since you can't catch a clue, let me show you. And that's pretty much, what was going
Mm,
on.
yeah.
So it's like they're always giving you signs,
Mm-hmm.
but do you have, is your are your senses in focus to receive? And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times when you end up in abusive relationships, specifically like narcissistic relationships, they keep you overstimulated
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
where you can't focus on like what's happening. You can't even connect to yourself because you're like your emotions are always on like fried. So you're just kind of freaking out all the time and you don't understand why.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in and share something here. And thank you for sharing. You mentioned something a little while back that I think is so important, and that, a lot of what we're doing here, a lot of what you do in your work, and what I'm doing here on Creators of New Earth, is exposing each other to things so that it's either like, oh, this is new and I haven't thought about that, and so it expands the mind and expands possibility. Um, but also, there are things that we do have in common that the general public doesn't. It's not like you go to a public square and be like, oh, you've been gaslit too, and you sit down and talk about it, right? So, I just wanted to chime in when you said about, oh, they keep you busy all the time. And, I wanted to talk about a little bit about the gaslighting, but I wanted to talk more about what you were saying is spirit started guiding you, because I too, some years back, and it's been like 8 to 10 years now, I was dating a full-blown narcissist, and I had no experience with narcissism. I'd never had a close friend who was a narcissist. I'd never had anyone in my family who was a narcissist, never been in a relationship with one. So I was green, I was blind. And I started getting spirit started communicating with me, right? Like, at that point, I'm still trying to get techno savvy, but back then I was hardly techno savvy at all. But they would just have me get on the internet and look at things, like in relation to him that I didn't know about, that he was never going to tell me, and he was gaslighting me. And all of a sudden, I get like, I used to think that all of it was intuition, but as I went further down the road, I realized, no, that wasn't all intuition. That was, some of it was intuition, and about 50% of it was guides saying, look here, listen to this, go here, do that, to pull back the curtain so I could see the wizard, and I could see the gaslighting, and I could see who I was actually dating. And it saved my life, because I learned later, and I won't go into that, but this is a person who had um, tried to take the life of an ex before. And if I hadn't removed myself from the situation, I could have found myself in that situation again. So, um, I'm not trying to be like, oh, me too, let me take the stage. I'm trying to share as a sister, saying, hey, whoever's out there, Candace has had this, I've had this, maybe you've had this, maybe you haven't had this, but the next time you hear of a friend saying that she is going through this or he is going through this, you'll have a little more sympathy or compassion, because it's a very real thing. And that people are out there who have experienced it. And if you find yourself in that situation or a similar situation, that as long as you are open to receiving, spirit is there trying to clue you in for sure. But thank you for sharing. And now back to you, Candace. um,
No, I feel you. I mean, it's always good for people to not feel alone.
yeah, yeah. You know, thank you for being so open with us and sharing. And like you said, there are things that we've talked about already that are like could take up their own show. Um, one thing that I'd be interested to delve into, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I was thinking about it I think a couple blogs ago that I was writing, and I was thinking about how the mind can get so linear, and how humans, we really like to compartmentalize things, you know? And it's like, oh, well, now I'm washing the dishes, and now I'm preparing Ken a meal, and now I'm feeding my cat, and now I'm watering the lawn, and oh, now I'm sitting down and meditating. This is spiritual. Meditating is spiritual, right? Like, so in other words, reminding myself, like Julie, it's all spiritual. Every single thing. It's what I bring to it, my attention, my focus, my awareness, that anything I do throughout the day can be spiritual, whether it's learning patience with myself, compassion for others, patience to do things that I'm afraid of that then grows my spirit, however you want to talk about it, right? And I know that for lots of people too, um, in the world in general, uh, work is not necessarily they think of as something that's spiritual, right? It's like, no, they go to work to get a paycheck and then they go home. But work itself isn't spiritual. That's sort of one vibe we can track. And then uh, another thing would be like people who, like me, for instance, who have passions, but they don't see they can turn that into something that sustains them, that becomes a vocation. There might be some steps in the way of that, like maybe they don't have, for instance, I didn't have all the techno savvy I needed to do that. um, Maybe some people just don't realize they can do that, whatever the obstacles are, you know. But for me, creators of New Earth, it is a vocation, and it is also a spiritual path. The two are not separate. And I'm bringing this back around to you because um, through being friends with you over the years and hearing some of your story and reading about some of your story through blogs and whatnot, um, I'm very aware that you were very successful in the corporate world. And then you decided to come out of the corporate world, and then you are, well, there's a whole lot in between there and now, but you are somebody who has so many skills, talents, and abilities that you offer to the world to help other people as well, and we'll get into that later. But what I'd like to talk about now, if you're willing, is what it was like to be in the corporate world, why and how you decided to get out, how you were able to get out. I know that that comes along with the healing process. And then eventually you went in the direction of your gifts to where you are today. It's a long journey, but if you could give us an overview and some things that you think would be helpful to the audience and share in that way, I would be super grateful.
Well, just so happens I just recorded an episode about this for my podcast. So you'll definitely get more of that. I have a guest who specializes in helping people when they're in corporate and when they're leaving. And I just put it all on the line and told him about my own personal experiences. And he, I told him it was therapeutic talking to him. Because one of the biggest issues that he said that tears companies apart is corporate politics. And that was the hardest part. So how I got into the corporate world was a client. I started having a business in 2005. Doing, it started out with making custom MySpace pages for rock bands. and then it went to like all musicians. And this is when I was living in Atlanta. And then it went to small businesses. And then through that, I taught myself how to build websites and how to, digitally advertise, search engine optimization, like all of that I taught myself. And when you have your own business doing it, it's kind of like it's easy to show and prove because you do something and then you have an output. It's not like, hey, I'm just winging it. It's no, you do something, you have an output, you have something to show. So I had a client, a woman who came to me through a friend. And it's funny how things happen. You meet somebody, and you meet somebody. I met this lady at a women's entrepreneurship event. Her name is Jenny. And Jenny was like, hey, I like what you're about. So I want you to meet my friend Tracy. So I meet her friend Tracy, and me and Tracy hit it off. And Tracy says, hey, I've got some projects I've been working on. I love your help. So Tracy became a client. And from working with her for a few months, she said, oh, have you ever worked in corporate? And I said, and she was, keep in mind, we were also working together. She was also one of my mentors, Tracy, the first Tracy. I have two. And so I was like, no, I've never worked in corporate. I didn't think they would accept me because I don't have a. She's like, don't ever believe that. They'll accept you. Put your resume together and see what happens. It just blew my phone up. I've spent like a couple of weeks this with recruiters every day, but I didn't know what to call myself because I could do everything, but what are you? And so many tried to fit me into the developer role, still do, but I'm not that. I can edit code. I know my way around some code, but I don't write code from scratch. And to me, that's what a true developer is. Never really wanted to go that far down that rabbit hole. But when I say build websites, I'm talking about WordPress, content management, Joomla, Drupal, stuff like that. So if you know, you know. Anyway, I ended up getting a job with like a Fortune 500 company for like it's supposed to be a couple months, like a contract. And then another company reached out and was like, "Hey, we've got this, and it's more permanent." And it was about $5,000 less, but it was more permanent. So I ended up going with that company after being with the first one for 2 weeks. Ended up staying with that company for like well over a year, and it was a culture shock for me because I wasn't used to working in a corporate environment. The first company was cool, no problem with them or whatever, they were cool, but it was just I was isolated. We need you for this. You just sit here and do this. This other company was total culture shock because they had just been through an acquisition. Wasn't sure what that meant for me. Like I understand what acquisitions are, but what does that mean for you as an employee? So as an employee, what that means is your job could not be. Your manager's job couldn't be. Their manager's job couldn't be because this other company that's coming in is going to bring their people in and they're going to make a bunch of changes. And everybody's goal is to look profitable. So everybody's an expense. So that's when corporate politics gets turned up because when you have companies making such drastic changes, everyone wants to make sure they're kissing the right behind. Um, It was hard. Good. Like overall, when I look back on corporate environments, it's probably the best corporate environment I had. But the hardest part was being like we were the ball. They were the corporate politics people were the ping pongs. They had the ping pong paddles. My team was the ball. My team meaning me and my manager. So they just pretty much were like, giving her a new manager. One manager would be our manager, and then 2 weeks later, he'd be our enemy because he was trying to compete. He then was competing with our team to be the best, most profitable group. So then you'd have the same person who was trying to lift you up, then try to sabotage you. That was creepy. The next place I went to was like a Fortune 50 company. The corporate politics there was ridiculous. And a lot of that was about them hiring the same person. They wanted sorority girls, specifically white sorority girls. And they were out of touch with the general population. Um, and when I say general population, I mean everybody. If you weren't part of their circle, they were like, they were okay. If you've ever seen Legally Blonde, that type of person, that's who they were hiring. That mentality over and over and over again. So I come in, they just love me at the interview, but I'm gonna be me. You know what I mean? And so a lot of people, um, black people in the corporate world were like, just play the game. What game? I'm here to make a good stride what I'm doing. What I loved about what I did was that I could show and prove every day that the content that I wrote made X amount of dollars. I had the kind of tool that would let me know you're making money. This what you wrote made us 15 grand today. What you wrote last week made us 150 grand last week. So I could easily put my money where my mouth was or where my fingers were for my keyboard. But when it came time for me to become permanent with them, the issue was I wasn't willing to kiss enough ass. So for me, it was like, hey, Candace, we want to hire you. We think you're great. Oh, great. How much are you guys paying? Because when you go from a contractor to a permanent role, it's different. So they never told me how much they wanted to pay me, but they were upset with me because I wasn't willing to just take whatever. The number one question, I don't show up anywhere for the purpose of giggles. I have a family. At that time, I had two children. So they thought they were like doing me a disservice or like, they were like, well, we're canceling your contract. All right. And sure enough, another it's like a Fortune 250 company came for me, paid me more. And they were so, I didn't say a word to them. By the time my last day came, they gave me a going away party. And the going away party, they were like, so what are you going to do, with your time? Because I think I wasn't doing anything. Oh, I'm going to start my new job next week. Where? And I told them, and you could tell like the blood ran out of their faces because they thought they did something by not hiring me or not hiring me full time or canceling my contract.
And the only reason they didn't
No,
hire you is because you wouldn't accept a job without knowing how much money you were going to make.
exactly. When like companies like that, they want to make sure you are drinking the Kool-Aid. That's
Yeah,
the,
they're
that's
like
the
a
thing. Are you
narcissist. They're
drinking?
basically like a narcissist, and you have to play the
Yeah,
victim.
right. So are you drinking the Kool-Aid? And I don't drink anybody's Kool-Aid, but I'm gonna come in here and do a good job, and you're gonna pay me. And if that's not gonna work, okay, I have other people who want to pay me, and that's pretty much how that works. So essentially, they um they were mad. I got paid more at the next job. I was at that job way longer, and again, a lot of things that you do with your job have nothing to do with you. It was like maybe 2, 3 weeks later when I left that job. A friend of mine called, left the one where they were trying to tell me how much they were going to pay me. Um, she called me and she was like, "Girl, I know your cousin just died and you've been going through these funerals, but have you looked at the news?" And I said, "No, because I've been out of town." She said, "Just look at the news." Looked at the news, and they were on Good Morning America because they had did some really racist stuff and then tried to cover it up in the worst way. Not even cover it up. They were apologizing in the worst ways. So they put something super racist out on Twitter. They went to the Rainbow Coalition, Al Sharpton, and all these other places to apologize for what they did. And a girl, really sweet girl, ended up getting fired behind it because they should have caught it, but they never caught it. Why didn't they catch it? Because they have this high sorority girl mentality where they don't see that how things are wrong. So a lot of my job at that time was correcting them on things that they were really clueless about. So when like racial things happen with corporate companies, a lot of times I just giggle because I know what it is. They hired the wrong people, the people who are out of touch with their clientele, out of touch with the rest of the world, and they just kind of are winging it, what they think is cool. And they're a lot half the time these people are like totally disrespecting their clientele because they feel like they're better than the company's clientele.
Yeah.
That's it.
So I mean, let's see. Let's see if I can formulate the question that will elicit the answer I'm looking for. What year was it when you left the corporate world? And how did you, as you were, unwinding from having been in that world for some years, you know, uh, what were you observing? Like, what was the psychology of the aftermath of what happened to you mentally, on the other side of that, like coming out of that world?
I can't say that it was dramatic for me because I don't trust companies, So it's like um my last corporate job in marketing was probably like 2017, but I always had my own business going at the same time.
Mm,
And I would have times where I would take a break because it was like mentally excruciating, spiritually excruciating. And so I always kept my own business. So I started a new business like 2011, and I've had that ever since. I don't trust corporations. I'm not the type of person that looks at another company and sees that as job security. The first, that one place I worked at for, or where they had the acquisition thing going on, it's ridiculous. Like they would have layoffs every 5 months or so, maybe less. When they have the layoffs, they have a Secret Service, FBI, and local police show up. Um, People walk in, and then next thing you know, you walk into work and you see a bunch of boxes, and those boxes are for people to grab. So I never felt like I had a connection, to the corporate world because I understand the corporate world had no connection to anyone else but themselves. So I
mm,
think when people get caught up in that, my job, no, it's their job. It's their job. You're there to gather what you need to gather, whether it be um, money, experience. Maybe you are meant to meet connections there that will go with you for the rest of your life. There's people I've met at these jobs that I still have connections with, either on a friendship basis or on a professional basis. And I love
mm,
that. But
mm.
I will never consider ownership of something that I can be let go from. So I have the two companies; those are mine. I can say this is my job, um, and that's
But you have,
I know
but
that.
you But you have, I mean, I feel like we've talked before, and maybe it wasn't in relation to yourself. You said, yeah, I have this friend who came out of the corporate world, and she was sharing with me how like shocking it was and how traumatic it was to
Mhm.
be, how she was healing herself. So maybe we can, and we have about, I don't know if you can stay a little extra. I do have one more question for you besides the one I just
Yeah,
asked, but
I can say, but no, it's
so,
different for
yeah,
everybody. Like one
yeah.
of the things that I do Soul Trying is I help people with burnout. And a lot of people to this when they experience burnout, it could be the end of their job, or it could be the start of something new that they're taking on. And a lot of the reasons why people do leave corporate America is because of burnout, and they've totally lost interest in everything that they're in every possible way. So I help people fix that, whether they stay at their position or whether they go. My other company, Inbound Concepts, helps people start their new ventures. So for other people who aren't me, you know, yeah, it can be very hard to decompress from the corporate world, to separate from those experiences, to find yourself again. Because if you're drinking the Kool Aid, that means that you're losing a part of yourself. Some people are very, very good at drinking the Kool Aid and maintaining their individuality. Um, it's almost like a Clark Man situation. But some people just naturally, especially depending on the corporate environment, um, naturally it's not a thing. But I go more into that on my podcast. That episode, I'm not sure when that's going to air, but go to
Okay.
businesslayer.com and
Okay. So let's do this. We're going to go into a little more depth about your offerings now. And then at the end, after I put this up on well, when we're done, I'll go back to YouTube and I'll go to um, Facebook and I can put the links for all things Candace into the comments there. Um,
sure.
yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, so Candace has a website. You probably saw it earlier. It was posted here, soultrine.com. And she also has a business called Inbound Concepts that she mentioned a little bit. And Inbound Concepts, that's her helping me bring creators of New Earth to life. So, in other words, she helped me with creators of newearth.com, which is a website hosted by Substack, and she created the website for me. And I got on here and got this restream, and she's when she's not on with me like she is today, she's behind the scenes. um and she also edits my blog every week. So if you're reading my blog, she's the woman who is editing that every week and publishing it on Substack. And so there's the Facebook page, there's the website, and then there's the YouTube channel, and the and this what I'm doing right now, and then Etsy. She helped me create an Etsy store. So she does I'm just using myself as an example, right? So, but she has many other hats too, right? So she's very gifted psychically. So you can get readings with her. If you are someone who likes astrology and likes tarot cards, she's also very well versed in those areas.
I'm
And
not an
so
astrologist.
she's not an
I won't say.
astrologer, but you are well versed in those areas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's better if I hand it over to Candace and let her tell you, like, okay, Inbound Concepts is about this, and Soul Trine is about this. And she's also an author and a poet. So she has some books that she's published. You could tell us about that as well, Candace. And yeah, just have a listen to Candace, and maybe, at the end, there'll be a way that she can help you that makes you want to contact her and say, "Hey, Candace, can you help me with this?" But definitely will say, if you ever want to do something like what I'm doing right now, like you're like, yes, I want to have a podcast, or I want to do live streaming, or I want to start a website, or I want to start blogging, but I don't know where to begin. I highly, highly recommend Candace. She's been very helpful to me in more than one way, right? It's not just like, oh, I hired her um, because she knows how to do this stuff and I don't. No, first of all, it had to be a character and a personality match. Had to be somebody that I trust implicitly. Um, and I guess you probably wouldn't realize if you haven't gone through this journey. Um, she's not just helping me with like, hey, Candace, I can't do that. Can you do that? Okay, yeah, I can do that. No, there's a lot of, she's had to witness me facing my own fears and had to guide me with what's called hollow bones, right? Where she stays in neutral, no matter how what I'm reacting to in my own life or whatever struggle, or I don't know how to figure this out, and I'm losing my temper or, you know, freaking out and losing my balance a little bit. She holds the space, or she'll encourage me, you know, or if she encourages me to do something and then I get a little defensive, she'll say, oh no, I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong, I'm just encouraging you to try this new thing. So what I'm relaying with all of this is that if you do choose to go to her for something like this, it's not just because she knows how to do something right. It's because you know that you're choosing somebody that can support you, you know, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Like she knows how to hold all that at once. So, okay, Candace, tell us a little bit about your offerings.
So I
Free.
have two companies. I have Soul Shrine, which is a metaphysical company. I do tarot reading, also do coaching regarding intuitive development. Um, also, um, the word is right here. Awakenings, helping people through their awakenings, which can be very terrifying for a lot of people. And I hold space, and I definitely help you through it. I help people with a lot of, direction as far as what to do, what to read, what to learn in that process. Um, Burnout is a huge one. So helping people who are experiencing burnout, and that could be from family, it could be from work, it could be from both, but just helping people get back to themselves. We do retreats in Jamaica, where I'm at right now, um, but most of my work is remote. So any remote work, uh, just like we're right now, we'll be talking just like this, phone or video. And I do have more offerings, but those are pretty much the most popular things that people come to me for, is help with their awakenings, um, intuitive development, and burnout. I also do spiritual work as well, by request. It's not I put on my website, but I help people with the things that go bump in the night. People with unknown bruises on their body, and they are the only ones in the house. Strange things like that. Um, and then for so long, I kept inbound concepts and soul trying separate, only to understand that they don't have to be as separate as they were. So right now, my focus is helping people who are more metaphysically inclined with their businesses. So people like Julie, and they don't have to have. When I think people think metaphysical business, they think, oh, do I have to have a crystal shop? No, it's not necessarily for people who have a crystal shop. Surprisingly, some of those shops, the people who own them are not metaphysical at all. They just understand this is a business and it works. But you could be a person who has a regular mundane business, but you would like to have a metaphysical approach to your business, or a regular mundane approach. You just want to speak in a language where someone understands you. And so that's that. And so when you work with me, it's not just about, hey, I'm going to do this for you. It is about working with someone who is going to hold space for you when you are going through taking on a new endeavor. So with taking on a new endeavor, a lot of times it's hard for people to do something consistently, to follow through, or to believe in themselves, to know that they can. There's a lot of people's issue in business or in general is just believing that they can and actually doing it. Coming across a new startup part of technology, or putting their face out there in front of people, creatively writing, things like that. So when it comes to digital business, I can handle operations, I can handle marketing, but it's also about you. And I also have purpose alignment is something that I added as well, which is helping people align themselves with their purpose. So the whole kit and caboodle for business, but my focus, my niche group are metaphysical people.
Thank you for
That's what it is.
telling me
Oh,
about that.
business layer. I'm sorry, business layer is the media hub of Inbound Concepts. So when I do blog posts about business and money, um, and podcasts about business, money, and corporate. So I do on podcasts, I talk about corporate climbing, corporate climbers, entrepreneurs, and people who just generally love money. That's my target audience. Everybody, essentially. So with that, with business layer, that is the media hub for inbound concepts. It speaks for inbound concepts. So that's what we have.
Um, so you, well, you can tell us if you want to speak about this or not, but you recently got invited into a coven. Do you want to say who that coven is and why they invited you there?
Oh no, it's not a coven. It's a business. It's a social network
Yeah, but it
called
is,
Coven Cloud.
yeah, and it's the women involved are witches, aren't they?
Yeah, they're witches. We
Yeah,
don't.
that's what
Coven
I mean
Cloud
by
is
coven.
a.
It's like a business
Oh
coven, but
yeah,
it's a coven of witches, right? Yeah.
yeah. So essentially, Coven Cloud is a social network for metaphysical people who are constantly searching, which is most of us. Most of us never stop learning. But the principle of it was for the owner, who the creator, the founder who came up with it, was like, hey, I'm in Florida now, but I used to live in Massachusetts and I had a coven. How can I stay connected with my coven virtually? And that's how she created it. So within Coven Cloud, you can create a coven today. You can sign up today and create a coven, or you can join one based on your interests. So I'm in about six at least. I created one that's business layered, where it originally started was on Coven Cloud. But I'm in at least six. I want to say there's some based on pets. There's some based on tattoos. There's some based on Good Witch Chronicles, Wicked Witch Chronicles. I mean, however you want to look at it, there's something there for everyone. There's things in there about home decor. Um, any part of witchcraft that you can think of or metaphysics that you can think of, it's on Coven Cloud. So I encourage you to join. It's free to join Coven Cloud, and you can meet people from all over the world. One of the most active groups in there is an exchange group where people witches will have different products, and another witch will have another product, and they do like an even exchange. So it's a
It's
great
coven
place. And so
it's covencloud.com, right?
yes, covencloud.com.
Okay, let me add it just a minute.
And so I um, I enjoy it. I am the editor in chief of the blog. So if you are a metaphysical person who is looking for another way to expose your voice and have something to say it and expose yourself to a new audience. They have a very, pretty big social footprint. So if you want to have that connection to expose your brand to a new audience and talk about something metaphysical, come on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And they didn't they invite you on to their board, Coven Cloud?
Yeah, I'm actually a partner. So I'm a partner, and then I'm on the spiritual. How they started was they found me on LinkedIn, and a whole nother thing. I felt I was hiding my metaphysical side from the world, and I wasn't putting it on my metaphysical company on LinkedIn. So when I did, that is when Coven Cloud found me and said, "Hey, you look like a metaphysical professional. We would love it if you would consider being part of the spiritual advisory board." And the spiritual advisory board is a collection of witches who are there to support witches who are having questions about any stage of their journey. And it's really to point them in the right direction so they don't feel judged or shamed for asking certain. A lot of times people don't ask questions because another person might say it's a stupid question or something like that. But that's not the case. We don't do that. We don't, there's no stupid questions. Um, and we encourage people to be safe and to follow their heart, follow their spirit.
Mhm. All right. Well, Okay. I'm gonna try to. I want to ask you something, but I want to frame it in the right way. I'm not looking. I know you're not a type of person who blows smoke, and I'm not asking you to blow smoke. Um, I guess what I am. So you do what you do, and I newly do what I do with creators of New Earth. And there's been a lot of things that have happened behind the scenes that has been very personal. It's just you and me, and the rest of the world doesn't know about that, and they don't have to know about that. But I will be candid and say that it has meant um, a lot of experimentation on my part, a lot of learning how to do things that I don't know, a lot of facing fears, um, a lot of you helping me sort stuff out, and um, and I suppose you thrive on this because this is part of what you do for a living. You help people like me who have this vision. You help us face all those fears and all those obstacles and get to the point where here we are. Now, Creators of New Earth is having their second live stream with yours truly. Um, I guess the question is okay, so for people who might watch this now or in the future, right? And they know me personally, or maybe they only know me from online. From you knowing me in Jamaica in 2018 to you knowing me now, and then walking through this process, and we're not done either because people might not know, but I hired Candace to be my manager. So she does many things behind the scenes. Like, for instance, she taught me content is queen, right? So that's me writing a blog. And then, distribution is king. So she helps me with distribution, for instance. um, and you knew that I was taking this on because it's a passion, because it's something I wanted to do, but that I also feel like that this was part of my path to put myself out there and to connect people and help people who are newly on this path to find a place like this where they can feel safe. But also, it's a platform for people like you and me so we can find each other. Like, look at that. You're over there in Jamaica, I'm over here in Oregon, and here we are having this conversation right now. So I guess, um, yeah, what obstacles have you seen me overcome so far? I know I haven't overcome all of them, but like, if you had to talk a little bit about Julie and a little bit about Creators of Earth and being part of that picture and helping get me here and seeing that process and then seeing what's happened since it's come online, even though it's in its very juvenile stages, what would you say? And I know you don't blow smoke, so I'm counting on you.
No, I don't. So with you, I would say your level of hesitation has diminished a lot. Um, because what you're getting into is new for you, you used to second guess and hesitate on things a lot. And it's like I could almost hear your internal battles in your head. And I could look at your face and I could be like, ooh. Look, and this is why you say like the hollow bones, because in my mind, I'm like, I'm staying out of that. I'm gonna sit over here. So, so over time, with confidence, you have built up a way to make yourself like you can. And I feel like today you feel more empowered to do so. And I feel like that is ultimately the goal for everyone. Like when I work with people today, I want you to feel like you can do it on your own, or you
Mm-hmm.
can have a team to help you do it on your own. Um, with select clients, I will work with them for a long, long time. But how I set things up initially is so that you can take the reins and go and feel comfortable going on your own. Like, there's trainings involved, there's everything is kind of set up for you to handle it. I know how to handle something on a bigger scale to where, I have to hire an agency to come in and take over for you. But that's not what we're doing. The goal is to make you feel more confident, not just set you up to do the work, but so that you feel good about what you're doing and you feel accomplished. And I feel like we've made it to a stage of that. I think there's more stages of confidence and accomplishment for you um, to still
So,
go through.
mm,
But I feel like you've made a huge step. Um, and I feel like you have less battles in your head these days than you used to. Um, and it feels good to know that you are like, well, okay, and one thing I have to applaud you on is your level of consistency. You don't like to miss a Wednesday. You show up every week and you have your stuff out and it's there and it's ready to go. And you look at this in a way that I don't feel a lot of people look at it. You look at this like a job. And I feel like a lot of people, when they get into creating blogs and they get into creating podcasts, they look at it as a hobby, and that there's a difference in the mentality for that.
mm,
So when you have someone who looks at something like this as a hobby,
mm-hmm,
they can put so much in front of it, and there's so many reasons to like put it off to the side. When you
mm,
look at it as a job, like I'm creating this, I'm doing this so that I can live off of this.
yeah.
That gives someone a completely different mentality, and that's I think where you are, because you
Mm,
look at this as your way of life. You
mm-hmm,
are expressing the idea of doing what you love and making money off of it. So the first thing to do for anybody is to treat it like a job, and that's what you do. So I think that's one thing I've always been able to applaud you on from the beginning is taking it
consistent.
seriously. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people may have the confidence, but they aren't giving it the seriousness that you do.
Thank you so much. Um, one thing that, wow, I never would have guessed that this is where consistency showed up in my life. And yes, I do treat it like a job. It's a passion, but it is also a job. And that's why every Wednesday there's a blog in anybody's mailbox who has signed up. And that's why, I said I would do these every other Sunday. And 2 Sundays ago I had one, and here we are again, and eventually it'll be one a week, and who knows, maybe it'll be more after that. But I want to speak to the consistency thing, and then we'll wrap it up. But I think I've told you this in a private meeting before, that for me, one of the things in my life that has been the most elusive uh, is consistency. And it's like, if I have favorite things, I'll always pick that ball up again. It's like, oh, if I used to meditate and then the pattern was all over the place, I could meditate for 2 weeks and then not for 6 months or whatever. Now I do meditate much more consistently. Um, but one of the things in my life that I felt could really be the driving force of many, many things is consistency. That if I could do things consistently, that would inform all facets of my life, not just whatever it was that I was doing consistently. Does that make sense? So, I feel like in my life, consistency has been something that has been so illusory. Um, and it does, I've chosen the same things throughout my life because I've always been um, interested in the esoteric and interested in my own evolution and interested in those things. So I've been carrying them all the way along. But it's like, how many times did I do this and this and this and this and this and this? Pick up the ball, put it down, pick up the ball, put it down. So it's fascinating that this would be the one area where it's like, wow, I'm showing up consistently. That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty, uh, yeah, I'm going to contemplate that. That's awesome to hear and good to know. And I think I did realize that the other day. I was like, wow, you've been very consistent with your blog. Like, I haven't missed a week. So,
That's really the formula for success for blogs. And a lot of people don't realize that, like, you can be super talented and confident, but if there is no consistency, then it doesn't matter. And I say this from experience because even with my, like, right now, I have four blogs that I manage and three of them are mine. I can't say that I am as consistent as Julie. I think I'm getting to that. I think Julie's inspired me. I'm getting to that place where, like, for Soul Trine, I do one article every 2 weeks. I think at this point, I get extra inspired around the new moon and the full moon. Like, I do full moon and new moon readings for Soul Trine for the
Cool.
email list. But for some reason, I get inspired to write a blog post at that same time. So that's when they
Mm,
come out. Aether
mm.
Candace, usually two a month, which is about the same. But Business Layer is getting there. It's about two a month at this point, but it just
Yeah, so
started.
they're all
But then
about
with
2 a month.
Comment Talk, it's more frequent. Yeah.
Mm.
So me, I think that's really for all I do. I think that's good for me to handle.
Well,
But
I
I
mean,
think I may increase
I
it
couldn't
soon.
imagine. Yeah, I couldn't imagine trying to write blogs for 3 different platforms. I mean, one every other week means you're still writing something every week. Do you know what I mean? It's
True.
just alternating.
True.
So, like that's a lot. And and meanwhile raising children, and meanwhile creating a baby in your belly, and meanwhile having, you have many things that you hold, because you have a lot of offerings. So there's a lot going on in your life. For me, I just feel like this is so much. Just I feel like I have two full-time jobs, and one of them is my caretaking job, and one of them is Creators of New Earth. And I know we're not here to compare, but sometimes, and I know we're all built differently, but sometimes when I think, I'm like, well, Julie, but Candace does this and this and this and this and this, and you're doing this and this. How come you can't do that? And it's like, well, number one, you're not Candace, and number two, there's no need to compare. And yeah, we're all made of whatever we're made of, right? So
Right.
yeah,
I try. I think I've just always been like this. But and even to keep it real, I really toned it down over the years. I really toned it down and gotten, more focused because I've been able to niche, because I've been able to, identify where I want to be metaphysically, how I want to show up in the world metaphysically. As before, I was trying to be two different people at the same time. I was trying to be the corporate lady, and corporate meaning
yeah,
corporate jobs and also corporate clients for my businesses, but then also be metaphysical. Once I was able
yeah,
to let that go and be the metaphysical person that can help people in these different ways, it was
hmm,
great. So for you, you have a divine focus. You didn't have to shed anything or do any transforming, so it's good for you. And I
mm,
love how, every week when you show up, you give so much detail in your blog post and you really take the reader on a journey. So I feel like you're doing a really good job.
thank you. Um, well, Miss Candace, I want to thank you because without you, Creators of New Earth, you're the midwife for Creators of New Earth. So I thank you for being there to catch that baby, and help grow it. And I would love it if in the future you could come back. I mean, I know from talking behind the scenes, um, that there's so many things that we could offer in our conversations to people who are either have been on this path for a long time or are new to this path. I think we would have a lot to say together that would be uh, helpful to other people. So maybe we'll collaborate again in the future, I hope.
Well, yeah, you know where to reach. You know where to reach me. I'm behind the scenes out here anyway, so you can tap
Okay.
me in at any time.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see, there's been a couple of people that I've been watching right now, and then who knows, how many people are going to watch in the future. So let's see who comes down the Soul Trine Pike. Let's see who comes down the Soul Trine Pike as a result of having watched this video. That would be awesome. So
That'd be awesome.
thanks again, and you have a real fun day over there, and we'll bring you back on another time, okay?
All right. Thank you so much, Julie.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye.